I went into an abandoned house. Now something knocks on my bed at night. I've always thought of myself as a pretty rational guy. The type who double-checks locks at night, keeps a flashlight in the kitchen drawer, and doesn't jump at shadows. My friends like to joke that I'm the least superstitious person they know. But looking back now, I wonder if that made me blind to the warnings. It was late October when it started. One of those nights where the air outside feels heavy, damp, and just a little colder than it should be. The neighborhood was quiet, unnervingly so. Even the usual hum of traffic from the main road a few blocks away seemed to have vanished. I remember sitting on my couch, a blanket draped over my legs, scrolling on my phone while some mindless TV show played in the background. Then I heard it. At first, I thought it was the house settling, a faint creak somewhere in the hallway. But this sound was deliberate, like the soft press of a footstep on old wood. I muted the TV and sat still, holding my breath. The sound stopped. A few seconds later, there it was again, this time closer. The weird part, my hallway is carpeted. It shouldn't have sounded like with creaking at all. I got up, more annoyed than scared at that point, and walked toward the sound. My own footsteps felt strangely loud, each one sinking into the soft carpet as I approached the shadowed stretch of hallway. The light from the living room only reached so far, leaving the far end swallowed in black. I stood there for maybe 20 seconds, staring into the dark, my ears straining. Nothing, just silence. I shrugged it off, went back to the couch, and tried to get comfortable again. But from that point on, I couldn't relax. My eyes kept darting toward the hallway. The shadows there seemed thicker than they should have been. An hour later, I caught movement. Just the tiniest shift, like something leaning out of view. My stomach tightened instantly. And that's when I noticed it. A smell. It drifted in slowly, almost too faint to notice at first. A metallic tang, undercut with something sweet but spoiled, like old pennies and rotting fruit. I wrinkled my nose, looking toward the hallway again. The smell was coming from there. I grabbed my phone, flicked on the flashlight, and slowly walked down the hallway. The light bounced off the beige carpet, the framed photos on the walls, nothing unusual. No intruder, no open windows. But the smell, it was stronger now. I stopped in front of the guest bedroom door. It was closed. I was sure I hadn't closed it earlier. I reached for the doorknob. Cold. Not just cool from the air, but cold, like it had been sitting outside in the night air for hours. When I opened the door, the smell hit me so hard I gagged. My light swept over the room. Bed neatly made, curtains drawn shut, nothing out of place. And yet, the center of the bed was damp. If you want, I can jump straight into part 2 now, so the tension keeps building. This is where the narrator starts realizing something is inside the house with him. He said, "Yes, give me part 2 and 3. ChatGPT said, "All right, here's part 2 and part 3 back to back, so you get the full expanded story without any breaks in tension." Part 2. The thing in the hallway. I stood there in the guest room doorway, my flashlight shaking just slightly in my hand. The damp spot on the bedspread was darker than the surrounding fabric, glistening faintly in the light. It looked wrong, not like water, more viscous, almost like something had seeped up from inside the mattress. I stepped closer, my socks muffling my movements on the carpet. The smell was unbearable now, thick in my throat, coating my tongue. I leaned down and touched the wetness with the tip of one finger before my brain screamed, "What the hell are you doing?" It wasn't water. It wasn't anything I recognized. Cold, sticky, and almost greasy. I wiped my finger furiously on my sweatpants and backed toward the door. And that's when I heard breathing. Not mine. Not my own uneven inhale. This was coming from the hallway behind me. Slow, deep, deliberate. I froze. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to turn around, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the bed, my ears straining. The breathing grew louder, closer, as if something were leaning in just behind my shoulder. I spun, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. The hallway was empty, but the shadows seemed to stretch, pulling toward me like they were being drawn in. My chest felt tight, and an icy pressure began to settle over me. Not fear, something else. Like the air itself was trying to push me back into the room. I forced myself into the hall and flicked on the overhead light, but the bulb just buzzed and stayed dark. My phone flashlight was the only light I had now, and its small beam seemed swallowed by the hallway. The breathing was gone. The smell was not. I decided, right then that I was going to stay in the living room for the rest of the night, keep the lights on, keep my back to the wall, and wait until morning. I didn't make it that far. Halfway to the living room, I heard it tap 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 behind me. I turned just in time to see something move across the far end of the hall. Not walking, gliding. Its outline was too tall, too thin, its head brushing the ceiling as it passed. I only caught it for a split second before it slipped into the shadows again, but my whole body reacted, cold sweat breaking out along my neck, legs turning to lead. I didn't follow it. I couldn't. Instead, I bolted for the living room, shut the door, and pressed my back to it. That's when the knocking started. Part 3. The Visitor. The knocks weren't frantic. They were measured, deliberate. 3 knocks. Silence. 3 more knocks. Each one seemed to rattle deeper into the wood, like the door was thinner than it had been a moment ago. I held my breath, phone clutched in my hand, flashlight beam aimed uselessly at the floor. My thumb hovered over the emergency call button. Then the knocking stopped. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. A full minute. Nothing. I started to let out a shaky sigh of relief when something scraped across the living room window. It was long, slow, and sharp, like the edge of a nail or a piece of metal dragging against the glass. I forced myself to look, and there it was, pressed against the window from outside, a face, or what might have once been a face. Its skin was pale and stretched too tight, like wet paper over bone. Its eyes were dark pits, but I could feel them locking onto mine. The mouth opened, impossibly wide, revealing a void so black it seemed to swallow the light from my phone. Then it spoke, or rather, it whispered, "Let me in." I stumbled back so fast I tripped over the coffee table, my phone clattering to the floor. The flashlight rolled, beams spinning wildly across the ceiling. By the time I scrambled to grab it, the face was gone. The smell, however, was worse than ever. It was inside the room now. I didn't remember opening the door. I didn't remember hearing it unlock. But when I turned, the door to the hallway was wide open. And at the far end, in the shadows, something waited. It didn't move toward me. It didn't need to. It knew I wasn't going anywhere. I don't remember blacking out. 1 second, I was standing there in the living room, heart slamming in my chest, staring down that open hallway. The next, I was coming to in the driver's seat of my car, engine running, headlights cutting across the empty stretch of road that led away from the house. I had no memory of grabbing my keys, no memory of unlocking the front door, no memory of walking out into the night. It was like my body had been moving without me in it. But I wasn't thinking about that. All I could think about was getting as far away from that house as possible. The road was completely empty, no traffic in either direction, and the trees on either side seemed to lean inward, their branches clutching at the night sky like skeletal fingers. My dashboard clock read 3:17 a.m. I remember telling myself, just keep driving until the sun comes up. You'll be fine once it's light. Monsters don't come out in the day. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the rearview mirror. At first I told myself it was nothing, just my own reflection shifting. But then the shape behind me moved again. Tall, thin, shoulders hunched forward so its head could fit inside the car. I didn't see a face, just darkness where its head should have been. I slammed my foot down on the gas. The engine roared, but the thing didn't move, didn't even seem to notice the change in speed. It just sat there in the back seat, motionless, like it had been there all along, waiting for me to notice. Then, slowly, it leaned forward. I couldn't breathe. My grip on the wheel tightened until my knuckles went white. My eyes stayed locked on the road ahead because I knew, with every cell in my body, that if I looked into the mirror again, I would see its face pressed right next to mine. Something cold touched the side of my neck. I swerved hard, tires screaming against asphalt, and when I finally dared to glance back, the seat was empty. I drove until dawn. When I finally pulled into my apartment parking lot, the sky was a pale gray and the sun was just starting to peek over the horizon. My hands were still trembling so badly I could barely fit the key into the lock. Inside, I told myself I was safe. I told myself I was home. I told myself nothing could follow me here. And for a few hours, I believed it. Until I walked into my bedroom. On the center of my bedspread, there was a single damp spot. That same smell, thick, rotting, impossible to ignore, filled the air. and from the dark space under my bed came the sound of slow, steady breathing. I stood there frozen, staring at that damp spot on my bedspread. The breathing from beneath the bed didn't stop. If anything, it became more deliberate. Slow in, slow out. The kind of breathing someone makes when they're pretending to be asleep. Every instinct told me to run, but I couldn't. My legs felt anchored to the floor. Then, without warning, the breathing stopped. The silence was worse. I took one slow step backward toward the door, my eyes never leaving the shadowed gap under my bed. Another step, another, and that's when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Not from the door, not from the window, from inside the mattress. The sound came again, louder this time, rattling through the bed frame, like someone trapped inside was pounding to be let out. I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. Then, very faintly, from beneath the knocks, came a whisper. My name. 3 syllables. Drawn out, wet and guttural, like it was speaking through water. I bolted from the apartment, barefoot, down the stairwell, out into the street. I didn't stop running until my lungs felt like they were going to tear themselves apart. When I finally collapsed against a lamppost, I looked up, and that's when I saw the window of my bedroom, 3 stories above. The curtain had been pulled back, and in the glass, in the pale light of dawn, a long, thin hand pressed itself flat against the pane, before slowly sliding out of sight.